Okay, so for this week, we're going to talk about the literature assignment, a few things on that. Also, our topic for the day is child services. Now, I really want you to go through and read the chapter. There's a lot of things in there, including a lot of things that are going to be on the test. We're going to go over some of the things. We're going to kind of branch out into the why, dig a little bit deeper into some ACEs and things like that. Things that are there's a little bit of that in the chapter, but not so much on the test. But it's like it makes more sense to me to put the whole thing together in your head to do it this way. But again, when you see the study guide, probably towards the end of next week, it's going to have all the big salients that are going to be on the test, all the big points for you to go through. So it's not like you're going to miss anything. But please do take the time to read the chapter. So first of all, the ever popular literature assignment. I know this will garner smiles and joy from everyone, right? So just go over this real quick, and if you have any questions, you can always message me. You know, ask me here at the end of this. It's not a big thing. The literature assignment, basically, you're going to pick a topic and you're going to research that, and you're going to do it as a formal writing assignment, and that means APA and all of that other fun stuff. As far as picking a topic, there's some really good examples here. You do want to be kind of specific instead of just homelessness. Honing in on like families with children experience homelessness. You could look at different types of homeless shelters. You might focus in on maybe what populations are served and things of that nature. So whenever you get an idea, basically think that you're going to match a topic with a demographic. Does that make sense? You're going to match a topic with a certain population. So if you're talking addiction, it could be teens battling addiction, or it could be teens in families, or teens who are suffering, family members who are struggling with addiction. I wouldn't choose that just because the title is really long, right? So, and for that, you will research that, make sure and get some scholarly references. Your book can be one. Your book will also point to some other references as well. This is something where you do not want to cite Wikipedia. It's a bad move. But if you're like, hey, Wikipedia can be a good start in some areas, because down at the bottom, they often have references there. So for some of these, that can be good. I would actually suggest going to Google Scholar or Google Books. If you're like, man, I don't want to go out and like check out a bunch of books at a library, one thing that I would always do is go to Google Books or Google Scholar. Has anybody ever used that before?
Mm-mm.
Okay,
No.
so if you go to Google Scholar or Google Books and then search in there, it'll pull up like the book or sections of the book. I mean, a lot of times you can get some quotes and you can get like a full article or full chapter out of a book that way. And it's with Google Scholar especially, it's a great way to look up things really quick and to get some of those peer-reviewed articles. There are you can also contact the library, and they can help you there. You can go ahead and access the EviTech Online library and get into their materials there, and you'll see several things as well. Now, also remember that all writing that you submit has that Turnitin feature, and that that checks for plagiarism, checks for the quotes and stuff like that. So and you want to watch about doing some things like that. I know there's nobody here that would do it, but hey, we've seen stuff like that happen before, right? I could tell you some horror stories on that one while we're recording. So you'll hit up at least 3 peer-reviewed articles, write it in APA format. Give the this is a real simple, you know, this is a simple setup to it. Background information on the population, specific findings in regard to the topic and population that you serve. Now, it's going to talk about available services and needed services and things like that. So the way to think about this is when you talk about available services, please keep it kind of local. Okay, you can do like one national service like AA. Okay, that's one that's kind of available nationally. But if you're also looking for more things on addiction, you might say, okay, Centerstone Recovery Center. Okay, that's one that's local. Okay. So needed services, that's the part for you to think, okay, what else is needed? And in order to do that, I would simply ask myself one question. If I had a magic wand and I could wave it and just do the bibbity bobbity boo, and all of a sudden there would be like some service that would help this out, what would that service be? So if you start with the magic wand question, that'll normally get the juices flowing to get that. Tempest, you're looking worried.
Well, my dog's like dreaming. I'm waiting for him to start yelping.
Okay. All right. Papers need to be at least 2 pages, no more than 3. Now, that does not include things like the cover page, the title page, and the reference page. Those are separate. So 2 to 3 pages of text. All of it's in here. Follow the APA format, things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up. Let's see, I have mine. All right. So for APA format. First of all, I would contact the tutoring center. That's one. But if you're saying, hey, I'm wondering what to do with APA format, I like to do things on my own. Here we go. You go down in modules on the left-hand side and then go down all the way to the bottom, and you'll see writing help. You have samples here, all these sources, all this stuff. There's even a sample literature review in here, tucked in here for you all to check out. So you've got tons of fun stuff there. All right. Now, once you get a little bit of this paper done, and I want you to send in your rough draft for extra credit. Now you don't have to do this because it is extra credit, but it's extra credit and it's easy extra credit. So for this, there's 3 different ways to submit. You can submit online to the tutoring center. This is the easiest way. Send your paper in, copy me on the email, upload the screenshot of confirmation of the receipt that they'll send you. I want you to copy me on the email because sometimes you'll have, there might be somebody out to lunch or whatever, and they don't get the confirmation of receipt back to you all the time. And I just want to make sure that gets back on time. So copy me on the email, and that way I know it's sent. Okay. You can go in person. You can either screenshot the appointment time that you have, or the confirmation of your paper sent as well. You can upload the paper that they give you back with the comments, and there you go. This is due February the 9th. That's next Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. If you're late on this extra credit part, you don't get any credit, and there's no exemptions there. But here's the thing. I want you to remember that this whole thing is a rough draft, which means that if you have your paper and you have maybe close to 2 pages, but you don't have it like all the way done, I mean, just send it in there anyway. It's a rough draft. They'll give you some pointers on it, on what you have so far, and there you go. The paper's not due until a little couple days out from February 9th, but this bit for the extra credit is. So like I said, if you get something down to where you have like a page 2 written, I just go ahead and it's February 9th, and it's you run up on evening and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to go into work or something like that. Go ahead and send that in. copy me on it, upload the confirmation, and you're good anyway. Okay. Do you want everybody to be able to take advantage of that stuff? Okay. So, are there any questions on the literature assignment, how to submit to Richmond Tutoring, all that other fun stuff?
I'm sure I'll have questions later, but I'll
Yes.
ask them whenever they
As
come up.
we all know, we all think of the perfect question 24 to 48 hours later. That's like with me. I used to be 72, then it was like 48. Now I'm maybe about 24, 36. I'm getting better. I hope that's the case with everyone else. All right, so let's see. I'm gonna go through a little bit on child services today, talk about that. Thursday, we're gonna get into a little bit on adolescents. Thursday will mostly be a time for some Q&A. There's a little bit more to add when it comes to adolescents. Going to go into one of the bigger areas now is like trauma-informed pedagogy, which is very hard to say, right? But it's kind of a big thing in education right now, where looking at how trauma not only will affect the brain development, but especially when it comes to a developing brain, learning and all that other fun stuff. So just going to go through a couple of those things. And I know some of you are like, boy, that is a snooze fest. And some of you are like, oh, that sounds so cool. So that will be Thursday. As far as today, let's go ahead and get started. Any other questions? You good? All right. All right, so we're going to talk about some child services and such. So first of all, let's go ahead and go with some of the stats. You know, this time I was thinking, hey, you know, we can all look up like stats on like what child abuse is in the US, but I thought, you know what? I want to check out Indiana. I'm just going to check out, I want to really like focus in on Indiana because that's where we live and that's where we all play. And so here's some stats for Indiana. In 2019, stats are accumulated. I pulled this from the DCS website and stuff. There were in 2019 there were 276 child fatalities due to abuse and neglect. Now this is up from 242 in 2018. 70% of all these deaths occurred in the victim's home. In 2019, Indiana also came in as the #2 state in the union when it came to child abuse. That's pretty bad, isn't it? Not exactly good. So, unfortunately, we received that dubious honor. It's sad to see how the death rates are climbing there, and they have risen significantly in the past 10 years. Now, in all of these homes, they found that there were some common stressors. The top 3 common stressors that they found were insufficient income, unemployment, and substance abuse. So when they put out these reports, they also are looking for certain human services agencies that might be able to address some of these. Can you think of maybe some agencies that might be able to address some of the stressors that are found in the home? Because the whole idea of these reports is how can we prevent this stuff? It's not just, you know, here it is.
What were the stressors again? One was substance abuse, and one was income. What was the other one?
Unemployment.
Oh, kind of goes hand in hand.
I mean, the substance abuse one is, I mean, that's kind of easy, right?
For unemployment, like a staffing agency, I would think could, you know, I feel like some places could, say, hey, there's a staffing agency that hires, people with felonies to kind of give them a chance to, give them a better life.
That is sorely needed, isn't it?
Mhm.
And there are some programs that operate in that way. There is the Pathways to Employment program that is sponsored by Belden. Um, I always joke around. It's, when you run a recovery group, it's actually good to lose people to like that Pathways program where they are getting a reset on their life. And this is one where people with felonies can apply. They can get in and eventually get the training and the job placement as needed. And it's work with realistic wages, which is really nice. I believe they start at 15 and go to 17 and then have the potential to go to 23 an hour. Um, they have there's some strict rules that they must go by, some weekly check-ins and everything else, but it's a fabulous program. I think that's also something that uh, that should be in more places. And I don't know, that could even be something for a literature assignment, looking into programs such as those. These areas, such as job placement, job training, and career counseling, uh, those are other areas of human services, areas that are growing. So we'll talk a little bit more about that stuff a little bit later on. But as far as Indiana is concerned, um, I decided, well, let's see if there's anything that's from, this was all 2019. Let's see how maybe we did in 2020. Well, when it comes to 2020, I started looking at that, and so in 2020, there were calls that were there were a number of calls to the abuse hotline. Now, these calls fall into two categories: substantiated and unsubstantiated. The substantiated ones, okay, they've investigated, reviewed, okay, this is what they're acting on. This is it. So trafficking, 2 substantiated calls. Sexual abuse, there were 247 substantiated calls. Physical abuse, there were 124 substantiated calls, and neglect, there were 1,879 substantiated calls in the state of Indiana. That was for December of 2020. That
Just
was
December.
That was 1 month only.
Wow.
And unfortunately, when I started looking at this, the numbers started growing, and taking that in, just looking at 1 month across the state of Indiana was rather huge. There were a total of 178,772 calls to the hotline center in 2020. They have, complete breakdowns on how long it takes them to answer a call and hand it off to the appropriate agencies, such as law enforcement and all of that. It's really unfortunate that all these come in, because when we look at the substantiated calls, I mean, the number of other calls, when you add it in there, which means that there are situations going on where people are suspecting something. I mean, trafficking, there were 2 substantiated calls, but there were 30 unsubstantiated. When you get to physical abuse, 124 were substantiated, but 2,396 were unsubstantiated, which means, I mean, there's a whole lot more that people had reason to believe something was going on. So it can get a little bit overwhelming, but there are some systems in place. However, before we go on, we kind of need to decide on one thing. What is abuse? We all need to make sure we're on the same page with our definitions and stuff. I know, Hope, you're seeing the Mommy Dearest, right? I know, I was reaching way back for that. No more coat hangers. For you all that don't know what that is, that's like, I couldn't even watch that movie. But it was a movie that, in fact, a famous movie that came out and really went deep into the mind of an abuser, and then everything that was going on there. Kind of really opened a lot of people's eyes, because Faye Dunaway was playing Joan Crawford, and she looked really freaky in that movie. a second. So when it comes to abuse, anybody tell me what is abuse? Now there's different types, but can you kind of give your definition of what you think abuse might be?
Psychological, physical, and then sexual abuse.
Psychological, physical, sexual. Okay, anything else, or you want to expand on any of those?
I feel like I mean, neglect is abuse because you're basically
Mhm.
you're not meeting somebody's basic needs such as food, water, shelter. Well, not really shelter, but well, it could be. Um, I feel like if your kid's hungry or your kid's thirsty and you're just straight up denying to get up and get him something to eat or drink, that's abuse to me. So
Yeah. So yeah, now put both of you all together, and you've got a lot of it. These are the definitions, kind of pulled from your book, CDC. These are kind of the short definitions for these. You did get it exactly right. Failing to meet a child's basic needs on neglect, basic
mhm.
physical and emotional needs such as housing, food, clothing, education, access to medical care, all that other stuff through there. Each one of these areas of abuse are charted in the when you go to the DCS website, except for one. Can you guess which one?
Emotional.
Very good. Ding, 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 ding.
Yay.
I would give you a Tootsie Roll, but I don't. So it's true. Emotional abuse is the one that is not really tracked because it's much, much harder to prove. And what they find is that um, in the cases of these other types of abuse, emotional abuse is always present in some form or another. So they kind of look at it as something that just kind of piggybacks on with the rest. So they track these three: the physical, the sexual, the neglect. They also do track the trafficking as separate. Um, one thing to note about neglect is um, I'd say out of all of them, neglect happens to be the deadliest because in Indiana, at least, neglect often kills about 57% more children in Indiana than abuse does. And unfortunately, it is harder to prove. And we'll see, we might see why later on. So now we have the definition. Let's kind of go into uh, what some of the effects are. So I decided to focus on the brain. I could have thrown in a bunch of pictures and stories and everything else, but you know that a lot of this stuff, I've actually got the report. I'd be glad to send it out, the DCS report. But this right here is your brain on abuse. And this is a 3-year-old brain, 2 3-year-old children. And so you have a lot of brain activity and a lot of blood flow, neurotransmissions that's going on to all parts of the brain, many parts of the brain in the normal child, right? Except for that dark spot, which is probably the make your bed spot, because no 3-year-old has ever made their bed. Just kidding. But when you get over here to this extreme neglect, you can see that there's much less activity going on. Things are rather restricted as you go through. And one reason is because as you get a lot of stress and a lot of cortisol build up, it can start restricting some of these. Also, if you kind of think about it, your brain, when it goes into that survival mode, it's really easy to become limited in your patterns of thinking. Why? Because you're in survive mode all the time. So your creativity and all this other stuff, that's not going to be going. You're in survival mode. So that's one reason that we see a lot of this. Now, the really unfortunate part is because, looking at here at a 3-year-old, 80% of your brain development occurs by age 5. So if there's all kinds of restrictions that's going on up until then, that's obviously going to affect you as you get older. So what happens in the brain, and I'm not a huge brain geek, you know, I know enough to navigate some of this stuff, but I'm not the person who's going to just suddenly blurt out all all the different names of the areas of the brain. That's just not my thing, you know. But I can tell you what's going on here. What goes on in the brain is that we forge pathways in our brain. Our one person referred to the illustration of a goat path. You know, goats always take the same path, and so they wear this, path among the rocks or out in the woods or even around the meadow or the pen. They take the same path around and around. Now, it's kind of like in the brain. Once you have like the same activity, action, or pattern of thinking, it kind of forges a path in your brain, almost like a waterway. And you have all the neurotransmitters, all the stuff that fires through there kind of gets in this channel. Now, over time, this is also how habits form, is that, you keep doing the same thing and then getting outside that pattern of thinking, getting outside that channel, getting the neurotransmitters to flow outside that channel is very difficult because this is how it works. This is the easiest for you. This is what's happened. And you forged it that way. In the case of this 3-year-old, forged the ways that work to survive. And unfortunately, it's kind of halted a lot of development in other areas as well. Now, if you go back to how this can affect you later on and everything else, there's a lot of development that's going on there. And those patterns of thinking that you kind of forge then and that you see are very hard to go back and undo. Well, you can't go back and undo them, actually. So the thing is, if you start out and you're growing up and you, for example, if you see, if you have the kid who starts out and is growing up and sees dad beating mom to a pulp, every week, then that child is more likely to have in the back of your mind, this is the norm. This is how relationships function. This is how mommies and daddies work. And so seeing something outside of that, it's almost as if at first it's like it doesn't compute. And so unfortunately, that person's default is to like go back to that and to see that in their mind. And that's why these patterns of thinking at early ages are so bad. And that's why we can see a lot of things repeat throughout generations, is because, your parents acted that way in front of you. It's more likely that you will as well. Now, can these patterns be broken? Yes, you can learn other patterns. You can learn other ways around. What I'm saying is that you can be, a person can be rather predisposed to, when they see all these things, to getting stuck in a certain frame of mind. So this is why you'll have, a parent who drinks all the time or a guardian who drinks all the time, and then a child who is more likely to try alcohol early and also abuse alcohol later on. So one resource that we have is DCS. Now here's just a brief breakdown of their procedure. They do go into a little bit more in your book. You want to look at that. This is just kind of a distilled version that DCS gives, and that is the call. They'll have a lot of questions. They'll do an official report, and they'll do the review and recommendation, get the reports in, findings within 45 days. So that's their procedure. Here's what I want you to look at, the response time. Now they try to respond as soon as they can. Now what happens is that when you make that call, I mean, they'll get the word out verbally right away, but they do have a response time, like their absolute max that they have to see in. So they try to make it as soon as they can, but physical abuse means 2 days to see the child. And normally if that happens, there is evidence that's there after 2 days. Sexual abuse, 24 hours. Remember when I said that neglect kills 57% more children in Indiana? Note the time on neglect, 1 week to see the child. So how do you think those times reflect on child safety and everything else? How do you think that can?
I feel like if there's calls of neglect, they need to see them
Mhm.
sooner than a week.
I think they should see them like within the 2-day frame and then follow up in a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this could be very well the part where we start waving the magic wand and thinking of how can we speed those times up? Is there another agency that could jump in on this? Because remember what I said, 178,772 phone calls. So if you've got that many phone calls, you're going to try to as much as possible. The biggest problem I see with neglect is at 1 week is if there's neglect going on, in some cases, people could clean that up
Mhm.
Yeah.
and make it look really good within that time. Some people won't, but I imagine that there are some people that do. I know some people that do. So it's one that I would love for there to be a way for them to get on that faster. Can any of you think of a way?
Hiring more people to be able to
Investigate.
go and investigate and see exactly what's going on. Because I understand, like let's say DCS here in town don't have the people. Let's say they get 5 calls in one day and they only have 3 people working. They're not going to be able to get to all of the kids in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So yeah, it does take time. So I think
Maybe
hiring.
train some volunteers that can actually help in the assessment.
Oh, okay. Train some
Yeah.
volunteers, tap into a volunteer base. That's cool. Does anybody know what the average, let's see, the average work life of the DCS worker, how long someone on the average remains in DCS?
I knew a girl who only worked there for 5 years because she's seen so much that's all she could take was
Okay.
5 years.
So we have 5 years. Anybody else? I know Brooke's looking it up right now. Okay, so I can only go by like what I've. I was in a this symposium thing that I was attending a couple years ago, and so I can only go by like this 2017 stat. But at that time, it was more like your average DCS worker was there about a year.
Hmm.
And so when you talk about hiring more people, but if the people only last for a year, because of all the stuff that they see. You mentioned a friend that lasts 5 years. I mean, that's a veteran actually.
Mm.
So people who stick around 7 years, they're more than likely leading the department by now.
Mm-hmm.
Things of that nature. So perhaps some things could be looked into then at the workforce itself. What are some ways to help employees handle some of the stress? What are ways that they can kind of detox? Maybe they need some time off after certain cases. Maybe I don't know. There's several things that I think could be instituted there, and to have those things instituted basically on company time, so that someone's not always pressed.
Therapy
And
could be one
Right.
thing.
yeah,
Because I know there's some things that you need therapy after dealing with. So therapy would be something that would help people deal with certain cases and things like that.
Yeah, I think therapy's good. I think even just like easy things like free membership to gyms. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe even bringing in some exercise equipment. Encourage
Therapeutic animals.
bingo. I love that. You'll find out as we go on in week 6 that I'm a huge service dog advocate. So, and if
That's
we
what
were
my
on
kitty is
campus,
for.
I would be bringing our service dog to campus for the class to meet. Might be able to do that next time. I don't know. So, um, because she's so cute and she has anyway. Yes, therapy animals. You look at there's a lot of studies in there on what they do and some changes that they will make. And some of the things, Lauren, I'm trying to get in the head of an organization that can talk to us a little bit that works with prisons and just see the changes that will come over prisoners when they incorporate service animals is actually huge. So those things are all really, really good. So let's move on from there to mandated reporting. Now, this is actually really, really important because, in Indiana, everyone is a mandated reporter. So can anyone tell me what is a mandated reporter?
If you see it, tell somebody.
See it, tell somebody. Okay. And what you would be doing is calling this number right here. Someone's in imminent danger, obviously 911, but that is your number. And so if you're wondering, what is the abuse hotline number? There it is. Now, the mandated reporting in Indiana, anyone can report. But there is a special emphasis on those in authority or that have special positions, teachers, human services professionals, counselors, anyone that has that frontline contact with children is considered to be in that special position. Now, what's really important to remember when it comes to mandated reporting is that it's not only reporting abuse, but it's also suspected abuse. So if you got an idea that something's going on, then you need to tell someone. You need to tell someone. Remember, when it comes to the reporting and this whole process, the goal of the state is the return of the child. Now, they will want the child returned to a healthy place. So there's a number of services and things and programs that they will do, like with the parents or guardians, to kind of try and fix the problem at home. And we'll get into a little bit more of the why of that here in a bit. But what I always wanted to know is, okay, so where's the line? Okay, that whole thing about suspected abuse. So can you give me an instance when you think maybe suspected abuse, as opposed to like actually having the evidence? Are there some things that you could say would be telltale signs? I mean, obviously, if you're looking at bruising and if you're looking at bruising or if there's obvious injuries, there's things of that nature. Oftentimes, like with school, you can start with acting out. If a child is acting out, and the question that would be asked is, we don't want to ask the question, hey, what's wrong with you? We need to ask the question, hey, what's happening? What's happening with you right now? So the thing is, we often run into, when it comes to culture in different contexts, we run into things that we may think are wrong. There may be the human service professional who believes that all forms of spanking are wrong, or some who might be like, well, there might be like timeouts only or something like that. We all run into things that we may think are wrong. But the question to ask yourself, the question that kind of keeps us grounded in this is the child in danger? And that's the main question that we need to ask. Is the child in danger? Now, abuse does affect more than just the abused and the abuser. It affects more than just than those two. Abuse actually goes really, really deep, and that is where we come to the why on everything. Now, I believe the ACEs study is mentioned just in passing in your book, but to me, this really drives the reason behind everything. I don't know if you're like me, but you can tell me to do something, and that's great. But if you tell me the why, then I can own it, and I really understand it. Then I go for it, and then I can be so much more passionate about it. And so knowing the why on some things really helps me. And so that's why I figured, hey, let's go into the why a little bit when it comes to this abuse and everything. So the ACEs study is a famous study that was done in 1998. And I'm going to teach you all how to access this stuff. It is actually super easy. All you need to do is go to your search engine and type in CDC, which takes you to that famous CDC website where everybody's checking COVID numbers, right? And then in the search bar, put ACEs, ACES, and it will bring up the ACEs study. It'll bring up the original, and then from there you can see where it's actually continuing on. 1998, the study that was done there, it was done in San Diego. Most of the people that they surveyed were white, and then later on they realized, well, most of the people were actually middle class too. So they started thinking maybe this doesn't represent very well. But then when they expanded it, they're like, actually, yeah, this brought up a lot of stuff that, we're starting to find these ACEs, everywhere. So it's not just limited to one area. Although what you'll find is there are certain populations that are far more susceptible to more ACEs. So here are the things that they asked about. If they asked something like 20,000 adults if any of these things were present in their homes growing up. Each one of these constituted 1 point. Okay, so if there was a type of abuse, okay, so that's a point. If your mother was treated violently, that's a point. Substance abuse, mental illness, separation, divorce, incarcerated family member, physical and emotional neglect. Each one of these garnered a point, and it would then weigh in on a scale. But these were the areas that they were looking at. And then here's what they found. People who have these adverse childhood experiences, there tends to be a relationship with things like chronic health issues, mental illness, substance abuse, things of that nature. What they found is if you have the more adverse childhood experiences that you have, the more chances that you have of one of these things happening later on in life. You suffering from, say, depression, anxiety, or PTSD, the unintended pregnancy, at-risk risky sexual behaviors, cancer, diabetes, alcohol and drug abuse, and then also limiting educational and job opportunities. I found that there was a correlation between all of this stuff. I found out that the correlation was actually rather huge as they did the study for a longer and longer time. Now I know, only Hope and I know who Iron Maiden is, right? Okay. She's like, no, I don't, sorry. Yes, I was in the hair bands in like 80s and 90s, okay, never mind. What they found is that there were a lot of people that were hit by ACEs. I can send you some of this information if you want. 61% of all adults experienced at least one of these traumatic events in their life, in their childhood, rather. 1 in 6 adults experienced 4 or more ACEs. Now, if you have 4 or more ACEs, all that stuff that's on that the correlation chart that I just showed you, you can about guarantee that you're going to land in one of those. So anytime you hit the 4 or more on that scoreboard, remember each one of those things is like 1, it's 1 point. Anytime you hit 4 or more, that means that you are on track to winding up in one of those circles. They also found that females and several minority groups are at greater risk for 4 or more ACEs. And they found this across, just across the spectrum. It wasn't just Hispanic, it wasn't just African American. The Native American population was actually huge. What was one thing that they found once they expanded the study even more. The nice thing is this study is still ongoing. Indiana is doing this was still doing this as of 2018. So I'm hoping that when it comes to some of the information that we're going to see for Indiana, that's going to be much, much more recent. And I have a feeling that due to the opioid epidemic and stuff, these numbers are going to actually be a lot larger. So here are the things that the particular things that they found that ACEs can lead to. These health conditions that are listed here and at-risk behaviors. One of the biggest ones I see is the socioeconomic, the unemployment, the high school dropout, no health insurance. If you think back to the beginning on the top 3 things that were present in those homes where abuse and neglect resulted in child fatalities in Indiana, you have insufficient income, unemployment, and substance abuse. So you can see that those things fall right into here. 5 of the top 10 causes of death are associated with ACEs. So what does all this mean? Okay. They found that people with 6 or more ACEs, that your lifespan can be 20 years less than a person who does not have 6 ACEs, which can be quite a bit, 20, I'm just saying. I know some of you right now are like, whoa, 60 years, that's like forever away. And then there's others of us who are like, 60? I'm not 60, I'm just saying, So how can we prevent ACEs? This is the whole thing right here. How do we prevent ACEs? Through this study, they found out that, okay, if we address each of these things systemically at a society level, that we want to put programs in that hit these areas to strengthen economic supports in families, change the social norms, provide quality care, enhance parenting skills. I can make these graphics available if you want, but this happens to be the focus. Now, why would we do this? Why would we want to cure these things? Why would we want to work to prevent them? Anyone got any ideas? Jessica, I know you have ideas. I can tell you the big reason, what finally got everybody's attention, what gets everyone's attention, both lawmakers and well, especially lawmakers. Money, 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 money. So when you start figuring out what do all of these things cost us eventually, it occurred to someone that you can actually chart this. And when they added it up, you actually get things all over the place. They said in the US, it costs us $401 billion annually. Someone said, no, that's not it. So I'm going to check around. And so there were other people that began checking and doing their own research. So you've got several different numbers that are out there. 401 billion is kind of like the one that's one that's rather accepted. But one recent study that was really good was Tennessee. They charted all of the things that that these ACEs cost, and they determined that it costs the state of Tennessee $5.2 billion a year. That if they could prevent all of these things, it would be that much better. Now, when I say preventative, if you go back and you can address some of these things, you'll address some things like healthcare and things like that. So just to put some numbers to it for us, preventing some of these ACEs can lead to, in the US alone, can lead to 21 million fewer cases of depression. That's 44% less. 1.9 million fewer cases of heart disease, 2.9 million fewer struggles with obesity that end up with some health risks. These are just a couple of the things that preventing some of these ACEs could lead to, which is how they start arriving at these numbers. So you can start thinking, okay, if you're talking about the heart disease part, okay, that's where the whole 22.4 billion in healthcare comes from. Tennessee has a great breakdown on it. California recently did theirs. I'm not sure how accurate California is. I looked at some of the parameters on it and they pulled in like everything under the sun. They said that for California, it costs $113 billion annually, and that's a study that was concluded actually last week. But they take into account years of productive life lost to disabilities and to premature death. So they, extrapolate on income there, which can inflate it. Overall, that 401 billion, that's the top end for the U.S. The bottom end on the U.S., the uber conservative estimate is 124 billion. Either way, that's more money than I can even count, even imagine. And once these numbers made it to lawmakers, then they start saying, okay, investing more in programs that address each and every one of these things actually helps us in the long run. And so the ACEs study ends up being the why when it comes to child abuse, neglect, endangerment, all of these other things. And all of those things are kind of indicative of a number of other issues that come up in society as well. So the thought is that by addressing these, we can actually save a lot of money as a whole. So I don't know if that was helpful to you to kind of like figure out the why behind all of this, and the end goal with the ACEs study and everything else. I found it very helpful because it kind of put, if you kind of think about it, if your knowledge is kind of like a sweater and it's got all kinds of holes in it, and then you find out this stuff and it's kind of like knitting the holes together. I don't know, I just came up with that. So you're going to be a lot warmer when you go outside, right? There you go. I know, Caitlin, I got a Christmas sweater, I'm going to have to like wear some, okay. And yeah, and we all got Christmas sweaters this year, and I think, anyway, you got to see my wife, it's the best. So how we went from ACEs to Christmas sweaters, I don't know, but you can rewind this later. Check it out.
Christmas sweaters are awesome though. Like I love anything that's warm and cozy. Blankets are my thing. Everybody in my family knows to get me blankets. That's all I want.
And on that note, I'll go ahead and stop the recording here.